BioBalance Healthcast episode 134, The Cost of Cancer Drugs.
BioBalance Healthcast features conversations about positive aging. Your hosts are Dr. Kathy Maupin, Medical Director of BioBalance Health and a leading expert in treating symptoms of aging, and Brett Newcomb, a licensed professional counselor.
Kathy and I have done a series of podcasts in the last 6 months about changes in the medical system and the way that it is evolving. And part of our concern about those changes is the question of cost and rationing and delivery and decision making, all those things involved in how do we take care of our population in the best possible way. And so something has flashed through the news just recently that caught our attention, and we wanted to spend some time today bringing it up again because it's a specific piece of data that allows us to refocus the message that's a more universal message, which is that the way the delivery system and the economic cost of that delivery is arranged in the United States is really out of balance and really needs people of goodwill and knowledge to look at it and say, all right, what are we going to do about this? And the example we want to talk about is a group of cancer specialists, oncologists, who have actually gotten together and written an article challenging the pharmaceutical industry, saying there has to be a line between profiting, which is legitimate and good and desirable in a capitalistic environment, and profiteering, which verges on evil and immoral. And the example that they use to argue this case as oncologists is the cost of some of the cancer drugs. And Kathy, you know about the cancer drugs and I don't, so maybe.
Well, first of all, what we've been talking about in our system is we're unhappy with the new system, but this is talking about we're unhappy with the old system too.
Exactly.
Okay, so this is part of the old system, all right? So what is happening is drug companies are developing very much needed new cancer drugs, and then they're putting it through the FDA. We've talked about that before, that it's very expensive to put it through the FDA, but I mean, drugs that cost 50 cents a pill go through the FDA, and cancer drugs are now so expensive that no human being could pay for them unless they're a multimillionaire. So what's happened is, I believe, is that there's a smaller number of human beings that can use cancer drugs, okay? There are a smaller number of possible patients. So they take this huge cost, which I think is started by the FDA and then profiteered by the drug companies, and the huge cost of getting it through the FDA and through all the processes, the trials that they want them to use to prove it. Then they have a huge amount of money that's a cost. They have to replenish that. Well, they can replenish that with so many patients. The population's small. So what they do is they just take all those startup costs and they divide them per patient. They make a drug $2,500 to $9,000 to $10,000 a month. I mean, no one can afford that.
Right.
And people who are desperate will afford anything.
If you cannot afford this, or if you don't get this, you'll die.
I know. I mean, it's not like if you don't get an antibiotic,
you'll be
in
really
most
sick
cases
for a while.
you'll be sick for a longer period of time, but you're not going to die or have lasting damage. But this is critical, and you have a group of people who have very few choices, who are very sick and don't make maybe the best decisions for themselves, but they want to live, and that's just a normal thing for all of us. But we can't afford this.
Or they look at, they have to examine what's my relative value, what's the value of my life if I look at my family, if I spend all that I have to try to buy one more year of life using this drug, and that may be a year of life that's very limited, very painful, very difficult to survive.
Honestly,
on its
that's
own.
how we should think, but no one thinks like that.
And I look at that. I mean, I would think, I have a wife and a son, and if I use up all those resources, what will be left for them?
That's true.
And people have to think about that, especially if they don't have cancer insurance or medical insurance that will pay the cost of these drugs. There are 120 leading cancer specialists joined together and wrote an article and signed off on it, challenging this thinking and challenging the drug companies. And part of what they had to say is that of 12 new cancer drugs approved by the FDA last year, of 12 new cancer drugs approved by the FDA last year, 11 cost in excess of $100,000 a year for the treatment.
For one patient.
For one patient.
That's
so
insane.
Even if you have a insurance with a copay of 20%, then you're still talking about having to come up with between $20,000 and $40,000 out of your pocket in order to get this
More
medicine.
than most people make.
More than most people make. That's absolutely right.
And that's crazy. And that's where we believe, and these cancer doctors believed, and we agree with them, that yes, it was expensive to bring on this drug, but then the drug companies are taking advantage of people who are desperate. That's what makes it profiteering.
The leading, the average income for a family of four, the median income for a family of four in the United States last year was $45,000. So that means four people don't eat, don't have shelter, don't go to movies.
Or they borrow so much they're in debt for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, to get this treatment.
And who wouldn't do that for someone they love, because they love their father or their mother or their child, and that makes total sense. I understand that.
Yeah.
I don't understand why it costs that much for that drug.
Well, and neither do these doctors. What they said, the drug companies that make these drugs profited in excess of $4 billion last year. Billion with a B. And so what the doctors are saying is, couldn't you make $2 billion and still have all that you needed to do more research and to buy your Mercedes?
That's not about that's not about payment for all the cost. That's profit off of that drug. So that makes no sense to me as a physician at all. And I have to say, physicians aren't asked their opinion anymore.
Yeah.
We are so far down the food chain. They don't listen to us, but in this case, thank you God, they listened.
They did. In this particular example, after this article came out, the drug company involved reduced the cost of the drug by 50%. Now, how long will it stay at that level is a question that people need to monitor. When this drug was originally approved in 2001, it cost $30,000 a year. Now,
which is still,
11 years later, it's tripled in cost. It's up to $90,000 a year for the same drug.
And you know that they did it because they could. That's the colon cancer drug, is that right?
That's the colon cancer drug.
And they have a drug for colon cancer, believe it or not, that has the exact same outcomes. This drug does not have better outcomes. So
and
why
it
would
has the
you
exact
use
same
it?
outcomes, and it still just costs $30,000 a year.
Right, yeah. And
So the
the
doctors
original
were
drug is
refusing to
$30,000.
use the new one, even though it was out there. They said, well, we're not going to order that because it costs too much money.
Right.
At which point the drug company said, well, okay, then maybe we'll cut it in half.
Right, they boycotted. And you know, it's a passive resistance, the same thing we learned in the 70s that you could do to change the world, and that's what you have to do to change this.
Well, part of the study that these doctors were doing, looking at cancer patients and survival rates, and they said that 10% of the cancer patients who are on these medicines do not fill their prescriptions and do not take the medicine because they decide they can't afford it.
Right. And that's shame on the FDA and shame on the drug companies.
Yeah.
But they, you know, I understand this is a business. But you can be conscientious in your business and not make an insane profit. It's not about that. It's about drug companies should have some kind of medical directors who are looking at the ethics of their choices and not just the business side of their choices. But I have to say, in the last 10 to 15 years, hospitals, drug companies, everyone has been taken over by the profit motive. And that's, I mean, hospitals don't have hospital administrators who are trained in caring for people. They have accountants taking that. That's who your CEO is. That's who your administrator is. It's
Not physicians.
Not physicians. There may be one physician on the board crying out in the wilderness about stuff that matters, about quality. And so we have now, by being in the old, I'm using the old system, the new system. The new system, all the profiteers are going to be taken over by the government, which is just as bad because they won't even be able to make these drugs in that system. These drugs, you won't be able to get them because the government's not going to pay for that. And so not only will it won't be available. So the drug companies are going to take a big fall in this, unless they cut a deal, which they might, with the government. But the government's not going to even allow this. So I'm looking at, there's got to be something in between.
Right.
There's got to be something in between where the government doesn't just say, nope, we're not paying for anything. You're a cancer patient, you're out of here. And it's too expensive for you to do it. There's got to be something in between that allows for the ethics of what physicians are trained to do. We're trained to look at the patient and do the best for them.
Well, there's
but
so
if
many,
they can't afford it, that's not the best.
There's so many players who all have leverages that they try to manipulate in the system.
Everybody wants to be a doctor.
You have the physicians, you have the government, you have the insurance companies, you have the pharmaceutical companies. The insurance company says, well, yeah, you've got cancer, and yeah, there's a drug, and it costs $150,000 a year, but it's experimental, and we don't pay for experimental drugs. So you either have to come up with $150,000 on your own or die. And we're really sad about that, but that's the way it is.
But here's where compounding pharmacies come into play.
Which is another podcast we've done.
Is another podcast, but where drugs are too expensive, pain drugs, there are a lot of pain drugs that are so expensive no one can afford them, and their insurance companies refuse to pay for them. And there are also cancer drugs. So oftentimes, when a drug is outrageous, compounding pharmacies will actually compound a version of that drug and then sell it at a greatly reduced price, which is really the role of, you have checks and balances in the government. It's like a check and balance.
Yeah, they're filling a niche in the marketplace.
They are, but guess what? They're being attacked daily.
Right. Oh yeah,
by the pharmaceutical
by the
companies.
organized pharmaceutical lobby.
Right. That's right. So in general, like if you look at, let's say something I do every day, testosterone for men, we have 7 different testosterones for men who don't work as well as testosterone pellets.
Right.
So testosterone pellets are pure testosterone, but they're compounded. They're made by a compounding pharmacy. Then if you use, I don't want to use the brand, but there's gels, there's patches, and you need a higher dose, and you double the dose, you can be up to $500 a month fast. And people complain, oh, the pellets are so expensive, but every 6 months, the cost is, for men is around $1,100. That's average, or actually, about average. So that's 6 months worth, where $500 is monthly. And insurance may or may not pay for that either, because it's over what they allow. So compounding is a way to decrease cost and also increase effectiveness, because a lot of the patients that fail the gels and the patches end up coming to me, and that's how I know about all of the different costs that they have to pay. They say this is a deal compared to what I was doing before with blank gel.
Yeah. And again, so you're back to the decision matrix, because, for instance, a pharmaceutical company, if I'm managing a for-profit pharmaceutical company in this current industry environment, and I literally have so much space on the plant floor, I have so many machines, so much ingredients, so many workers, and I have to make a decision. Which drug that I'm going to manufacture that I can sell covers my costs and makes my profit? And so if I can take the whole production outcome of my factory and generate 50,000 pain pills that are going to cost $50, or I can generate 5 different pain pills that are going to cost $1,000 a piece. Where am I going to spend that factory time?
If that's how you make your decision, then you're going to make it solely on the profit market.
Well,
profit.
My family gets caught up in one. My son is on attention deficit medicine, and the federal government has said Too many doctors are prescribing this medicine too often for too many people. So they restrict the production quotas that the drug companies can make.
And it's a controlled
So
substance.
my physician, who is trained and expert at diagnosing and determining what needs to be done, on her license says, your son needs this medicine every month.
I know.
So I follow her advice. I go to the drugstore and I hand them the prescription, and they say, well, we don't have any of that, and we don't know when we'll get it in. And I'll say, why not? And they say, because the FDA is not letting people make it. So I
And
say, well, what am I
happens
supposed
when
to
the
do?
government runs it. So there's no good answer right now.
They say, write your congressman. I said, yeah, but the kid needs the pill tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yeah, to go to
Well,
school.
then you need to drive around to all the other pharmacies in town to see if somebody has it.
That's crazy.
And I said, well, can you call? No,
We're in
not allowed to.
America. We should have choices.
HIPAA won't let us do that. So anyway, it's frustrating, and it's a low grade
gonna scream
example.
on
It's
camera.
not life threatening, but it's part of the problem. And
It is.
people that don't have the time, the education, the resources to fight the system get run over by the system.
Well, they just say forget it.
They do,
You
and
know,
so they
they
don't.
may have something terrible,
Yeah.
and they go, I'm not doing this, and my copay is like $200. I'm not doing that, and
Yeah.
I have a deductible for $5,000. I can't pay for the cost
Right.
of the
So
drug.
I just won't take it.
So they bag it,
Yeah.
and then they end up with something so much worse.
I'll drink a 64-ounce soda and make myself feel better with sugar.
Oh, come on. All right. You can.
No,
But I'm
seriously,
not.
people withdraw and bury their heads in the sand because they are afraid or because they are
It's
handicapped
normal response to this.
in their ability to fight the system. And so what obviously needs to continue, and what we're urging you to do, is to be informed consumers and make your voice heard. Talk to your physicians, talk to your congressman, talk to
Write letters.
Write
I mean,
letters
they
to the
actually look at
pharmaceutical
those.
companies. These
But
doctors,
no, don't. They'll throw them away.
Well,
write
you know
letters. Write letters to your congressman, who will then make the pharmaceutical companies
Mm-hmm.
do something about restricting the production of drugs that are needed.
yeah,
I mean, I don't care if everyone in America needs ADD medicine. If you need it, you need it.
right.
And all the toxins in our
Well,
environment
and
is
who do
making
you want to make
ADD
that decision? A
common.
bureaucrat somewhere, or a
Or
physician?
your doctor.
Yeah,
The whole point in being a doctor is to care for people,
Right.
and to find. I think about the cost of a drug. I
Right.
mean, I try when I'm writing prescriptions.
Mm-hmm.
In general, I write old-fashioned, very common, very
Yeah.
easy to get, cheap drugs because they still work.
right.
And there's a few that don't. There's a few drugs that I have to write for specific reasons that aren't. But I look for that, and I'm trying to be conservative, not of the whole, not of the social, how many people are on whatever, but for that patient's pocketbook. Now, I just want to address the fact that pellets for men aren't cheap. Pellets for women now are equivalent to taking 3 prescriptions and those copays every month. And we put it all into one pellet. And their prescriptions are usually highest copay for hormone replacement. So for women, it's a trade-off. And for men, it's actually probably a better deal, but it's upfront cost. So I don't want to be criticized for the profit motive, but you do have to keep your business going, and
Sure.
you have to pay your people well, and that's what I do. So just in case I was about to get an email about that, then I can assure you that I am very conservative about how the money is spent and how we price everything.
Well, and you've got a lot of data that you can show people about the comparative cost-benefit ratios. If I'm paying $500 every 2 months, 3 months
4
for
months.
pellets, but I can come off of medicines that I'm paying $200 every month for when I don't have the pellets, it's a wash for me.
Even if you're not talking
And I
about
have to
quality
realize
of
that.
life.
Yeah. even if
Quality
you're
of
not talking
life
about
is
feeling better.
huge. But even if we're not even considering quality of life, if we're not, or productivity at work, or anything like that, we're looking at just what you can come off of if you can get the pellet, if you can do what you're end is, which is eat right and exercise.
Right,
And
right.
if you do your part, we've got pellets for making you have enough motivation and energy to do your part.
Right.
And so now diets will work. We can get rid of the obesity. We can decrease the risk of diabetes. We can decrease medicines for that, and for hypertension, and for
And osteoporosis and depression and anxiety. I mean,
and all that junk that you buy at the store to try to help you to lose weight.
Yeah.
You can get rid of all that if you counted all
all the
that up.
over-the-counter stuff that you buy. Yeah.
Then that's just the immediate cost. Then I look at it this way: you don't have to pay for all that Aricept for your Alzheimer's later, and because we're going to be delaying all of those, you don't have to pay for Fosamax or those very expensive osteoporosis drugs, which are not very effective
And have side effects
and have
that you don't
terrible
want to deal
side
with.
effects.
Yeah.
Because you're getting your hormones. It takes the place of that. I mean, just think, I will have wasted all that money on my nursing home insurance, as we call it.
Well, yeah.
But other things can get you so. I'm not, saying you shouldn't have that. I'm just saying for that particular reason, which is why most people have to be cared for,
Yeah.
is that they can't get around.
So at the end of the day, the message is participate in the dialogue. Be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And that means that you have to be informed, that you have to get information, you have to talk to the people involved, whether you're complaining to your insurance company and writing an appeal, whether you're complaining to your physician, but also complain to your government officials who are in the decision-making process for these regulatory agencies.
Email your questions or comments to podcast@biobalancehealth.com. You can find the BioBalance Healthcast on iTunes and on YouTube. For more information about bioidentical hormone pellet therapy and other reverse aging solutions, visit biobalancehealth.com or call 314-993-0963. You can find Dr. Maupin on Twitter @Dr. Kathy Maupin and on Facebook at facebook.com/biobalancehealth. Find Brett Newcomb at brettnewcomb.com.